Today we're gonna talk about the phenomenon of mistyping others and most importantly yourself. I think mistyping can happen for a variety of reasons, such as negative stereotypes that exist, inaccuracies with either the test or your emotional state while taking the test and not knowing that this matters, and a bunch of other factors that we're going to talk about today.
I think a big part of it is that a lot of people type based on the letter dichotomies versus on cognitive functions. So a lot of people would be like, oh, okay, am I a thinker or am I a feeler? They'll approach this by being like, oh, okay, do I value logic more or do I make more logical decisions? Or am I more emotional and do I make more emotional decisions? And this can be problematic, especially if those two cognitive functions or those two letters in question are your second and third functions. Then they can be kind of maybe more in a similar level of development and it might be less obvious. Oftentimes typing just with the letter dichotomies can just lead to like inaccuracies, and I think like you said in a previous video, it's too binary way to approach it when it's a more complex model than that.
With the dichotomy thing, it's also like more prone to being affected by stereotypes. So like people who are thinking, am I a thinker or a feeler? For feeler, they automatically think of this like fairy dancing around in the forest, and the thinker is like for example, if you're like studying sciences, you're like, oh, I'm automatically a thinker, but that's not true. You can be a feeler, and I mean, this sounds so obvious, but people actually do think like this, basically, like when they don't understand it that much. They think it's either or, but it's more like nuanced because you have both at different positions. Yeah, and I guess if you learn more about MBTI and about the axes, you see how like thinking and feeling, they work together. Yeah, if people are just like binary thinking, then it's so scary to identify as like one or the other. It's like if I pick feeling, then oh my gosh, I can't be logical, and then I pick thinking, then I'm heartless. Yeah, so all these stereotypes.
I think a huge part of it too is just that people are probably just not that aware of their behaviors a lot of the time. We just kind of have this self-image of ourselves that can be kind of inaccurate probably a lot of the times. Like we just maybe have this self-image of maybe like our ideal self. Yeah, I don't think we have a very unbiased view of like our own behaviors. And I think a lot of the tests and a lot of typing based on like the letter dichotomies looks a lot at behaviors. And I think this is problematic. Behaviors can also be influenced by like external factors besides something more like genetic, like personality. Like if you're a TJ raised in a more kind of FJ, FE environment, then maybe you'll like adopt some more FE qualities that maybe it's not comfortable for you, but you can kind of like learn how to approach people in a more FE way. And so things like that can kind of make typing more iffy. But I think if you approach it more in terms of how you process things mentally and less about how you behave, then it becomes more accurate. Like I think less conscious behaviors are helpful in typing, but I think more conscious behaviors are again more associated with like our kind of self-image and how we want to be and how we want to present ourselves, and this doesn't have anything to do with our personality type. This just has to do with like our identity that we constructed for ourselves, basically.
A lot of the people I talk to over-rely on their test results. When I challenge their typing, they're like, well, I tested as this, and sometimes they say, well, I even paid for this test, so it must be accurate. I'm just like, no. There are a lot of problems with testing, so I'm going to list them. Number one, a lot of the questions ask you to evaluate yourself, and we see how this could be problematic. It says, like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you trust your emotions when making decisions? No one can accurately judge that about themselves. Like, first of all, it's not like 1 to 5, I'm sure everyone will agree, that's not a scientific meter. Like, oh, 5, 1. And also just remembering these situations. And so memory, accurately gauging these situations, determining how much you use your emotions, such a subjective question. And then like how you want to appear. If I wish I was more emotional, maybe I'll pick 4 or something, even when it's not really. Yeah, making you judge yourself. That's like one of them. even if others are judging you, yeah, they might also judge incorrectly. The other thing is calling out websites here. No, the other thing is a lot of the tests, I think some of the tests actually do test for how much you use each of the 8 cognitive functions. Yeah, I found one that's like that, so that was pretty cool. But most of the tests, and like the most popular test, yes, I will call this one out, like 16personalities.com or something, or 16types.com. I'll put a link somewhere. Yeah, that one does seem to be not about cognitive functions, but about like the dichotomy. So, for example, it'll be like, how much do you like to spend time alone? So that's obviously testing for introversion versus extroversion. Like, do you get tired after a party? Yeah, that's like testing I versus E, but then it's just not a good system. And questions like, is your room messy? Like, how? So that's testing for J versus P. And also, like, you know, how emotional you are, testing for T versus F. Oh, and then more stupid questions like, are you an ideas person? Testing for, like, intuition versus sensing when we all have both.
Even with the cognitive function tests sometimes, I think they can even kind of put stereotypes onto cognitive functions that are, like, not that helpful, too. For example, like, for FI versus FE, they might be like, oh, do you value individualism more, or do you value, like, group values? Like, if an FE user is in, like, some sort of group where they just really don't agree with the values, and a lot of FE users, I think, will actually, like, maybe make a stand and try to maybe change group values. Like, they're just kind of aware of group values, and I think they're just better at using them and trying to, like, inspire other people or make people, like, feel what they want them to feel. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're, like, always going to be super harmonious, and, like, there's FI users that might might value harmony for, like, whatever reason and might just act more harmonious, but that's still, like, maybe the process of coming to that conclusion of that's something they value was, like, an individualized internal process.
Oh yeah, for the stereotypes of cognitive functions, for example, like, this test was actually pretty good, but at one point, so basically, they put you at a percentage rating usage for each cognitive function. And then at one point they wrote, you're attracted to the mysterious and mystical. I'm like, F that! That's testing for NI. I know that's testing for introverted intuition, but I put like scale of 1 to 10, like 10, because yeah, who isn't attracted to mystical things? But that does not determine like your NI usage at all.
You have to look more at the process behind behaviors than just the behaviors themselves. And I think Michael Pierce calls this the difference between like structure and content. I just want to shout out to Michael Pierce because he helped us a lot, I think, in understanding these things. Yeah, so like the structure of FI and the structure of FE are very different, but the content of what they value actually might be the same because it's still value-based functions. So yeah, you have to be careful with things like that.
Yeah, and I feel like most tests, they are testing for content rather than structure. The focus on content is why so many people think MBTI is not valid or like putting people in a box because they're like, oh my gosh, if I'm this type, then I must like all these things or do all these things. Right. But then no, you can like and do anything you want. It's just usually the structure of how you perceive information and decide upon that information will be different, even though many different types could come to the same conclusion.
Yes, MBTI absolutely could be used as a tool to put people in boxes if you do that. But you also don't have to do that. You can be like, yeah, okay, it's just like minds work differently. And the process might be different, but yeah, exactly. Like all different types may come to like very similar conclusions and have very similar mental content. And it actually doesn't have to put people in boxes at all, I think. So not only are there stereotypes within each letter or within each cognitive function, but there are also stereotypes about each type, right? That often are like so removed from like what the actual cognitive functions are. It's like it's like maybe humans, if there's like this, you know, whole Jungian kind of collective subconscious that like deals with archetypes or something like that, then maybe we just like want to like put archetypes onto all these types and be like, oh yes, the ISFP is the artist and the ENTJ is like the CEO and like these kind of things. Maybe that's just like how the biased human mind works.
It's catchy. It's like an easy sell. Like,
right.
Rather than like just explaining from the foundation up is almost like TI, you know, like, yeah, sometimes it's just more appealing to be like, let's pick a different color for each of the types. This is why the fruits video is doing well. Like, honestly, it's just more catchy to be like, oh, if you're this MBTI type, you're this fruit, rather than like, let's actually explain everything. I want to put like one note, which is that If you haven't read about the cognitive functions yet, which I'm sure most of our audience has, if you haven't read it, it's really beneficial to read it first, like read all the cognitive functions first, and then figure out which ones you relate to most, instead of the other way, which is like looking at your MBTI and figuring out which kind of functions your MBTI has, and then reading it, and then going back to your MBTI, because it just makes a confirmation bias, right? You don't want to make a confirmation bias where first you figure out which functions you supposedly have, and then you start seeing everything you do based on that filter. Yeah, it's just better to go into it knowing nothing, and then, yeah, really, like, read all of the functions, and then determining which one is more likely you.
And be honest with yourself, and try to detach yourself from, like, your kind of self-image. Especially, I think, maybe as, like, people age a little bit. So maybe if you discover MBTI, like, in your late 20s or 30s or 40s or something like that, or later. Like, for example, right now, if I discovered MBTI right now, I'm kind of in the process of maybe, like, getting more in touch with FI and SE even. So that might be more a predominant part of my kind of self-identity right now. And so maybe I would type more, like, ISFP or INFP right now, just because I'm more focused on, like, developing the feeling and sensing side of myself, right? So I think we have to have that awareness of, like, oh wait, no, I'm going more into, like, what I want to see myself as.
It's really hard. One of the hardest things ever in life is to be honest with yourself. First of all, there's accuracy. So sometimes you want to be honest, but you're just not accurate, and sometimes there's denial, so you're accurate but you don't want to see it. Even like when I was first learning about MBTI, I thought it was so uncool to be a feeler, so I really wanted to be a thinker. Like, I tried so hard to be a thinker, and actually I tried to be an extrovert as well, so I was like fine with an NMP. I think so basically I wanted to be ENTP. I don't know, I wanted to be thinking, I wanted to be an extrovert. So now it's almost like embarrassing because we have like this YouTube channel, but a lot of people are saying I'm ENFP, and I think that that's actually possible. So I've been looking into, like, you know, maybe I could be ENFP, but this whole process requires me to, like, especially since after all these years, I've been, like, relating to people who are INFP, like the authors that I like, and, like, obviously not wanting to be wrong. I have a YouTube channel, but I was wrong about my own type. What? So just, like, detaching from all of that and trying to be objective, so I still haven't really, like, made a decision. But that's the other thing, it's not really a decision, so it doesn't really matter what you like or what you want. And a lot of people don't know this. It's just like how you are, you know. You have to detach your desires, because it's not like, oh, I want to be that type, I'm that type, yay. Like, choosing your identity, it might be even hard to swallow because we're so liberal right now. Like, you can choose anything. I can choose to be a man, basically. I mean, right? Like, that's the political... Wow, this is gonna get really deep. No, but that is the political atmosphere we're at. Like, I can identify as, like, a duck or something, and people will cheer me on for that. I think we're done. Okay, well, hopefully you guys thought that was helpful. Let us know if you've ever mistyped yourself before, or if you've mistyped your friends, and how did you figure out, like, the true type.